Tonight, we are learning more about a deadly shooting at a Buckhead apartment complex where authorities say a father shot and killed his son. Devonte Rao Tolliver is charged with murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Police say it is in connection to the shooting death of Devonte Scoffield, who was killed early Thursday morning. Police say there was a disagreement between Scoffield and his girlfriend. They say the girlfriend called his father, and at some point there was a fight between the father and son. According to warrants, Rao Tolliver told police he believed his son was about to pull a gun out on him. That's when he says he shot him. Warrants say Scoffield was shot at 12 times.
What's good, everyone? Welcome to Behind Dark Crime, where we break down real cases of domestic violence and crimes that happen behind closed doors. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. You're already here, you might as well stay. Now, let's get into it. Devonte Scoffield was 32 years old, living in Buckhead, Atlanta. Father of 2 young kids, working as an independent contractor, building his own business, trying to make something of himself, and according to his sister, he was doing exactly that. See, Devonte had a past. He was a convicted felon. No hiding that. But he'd done the work. He'd turned things around. His sister would later say he cared genuinely and deeply about people. He was a passionate person, a lover, a giver, a helper. That's how his family remembered him. But here's the thing about turning your life around. Not everybody gets to see the new you. Some people, they're stuck on who you used to be. And sometimes, those people are the ones closest to you. Devonte's girlfriend worked as a Fulton County Marshal, law enforcement. She knew how things could go left, knew when to call for backup, and on this particular night, things between her and Devonte had gotten heated. An argument. The kind that happens in relationships, especially toxic ones. And this relationship? It had a history. Police had been called to that apartment times 12. Times in just that year alone. Once a month, like clockwork, something was popping off at that address. So when tensions rose that night, she made a call. Not to 911, not to her colleagues. She called Devonte's father, Devonte Rao Tolliver, 54 years old, lived close by in the same Buckhead area. He was Devonte's dad. But let me tell you something, their relationship was complicated. Both of them had criminal records. Both of them were ex-felons trying to navigate life after their mistakes. But the thing about being a father to a 32-year-old man is this. You can't parent him the same way you did when he was 12. You can advise, you can talk, but you can't control, you can't discipline a grown man with your hands. Tolliver didn't seem to understand that. When the girlfriend called, she told Tolliver that Devonte had been in a car crash. There was also mention of the argument they were having. The details get murky here, but what's clear is this. Tolliver got in his car and drove to the 55 Farr apartments in Buckhead. It was late. It was tense. And whatever peace that girlfriend was hoping for, it never came. Tolliver arrived, and things escalated times quick, asterisk. He and Devonte got into it, not just words, but fists. A physical fight broke out inside that apartment. Father and son throwing hands like strangers in the street. Over what? A car? The relationship? Old wounds that never healed? We don't know for sure. But what we do know is that it got loud enough, violent enough, that someone called the police. Atlanta PD rolled up to the scene. Officers knocked on the door, separated everybody, started taking statements. And here's where it gets interesting. By the time the cops arrived, both men had calmed down. Devonte and his father were times calm, asterisk, collected, cooperative, even. The officers interviewed the girlfriend inside the apartment, trying to piece together what had happened, making sure everybody was safe. Devonte and Tolliver, they walked out of that apartment times together, asterisk, side by side, calm as day. The cops saw them leave, heading toward the parking lot. There was no yelling, no visible aggression. To the officers still inside doing their jobs, it looked like the situation had been handled. Crisis averted. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Picture this. It's just after midnight in Buckhead. The officers are inside the apartment wrapping up their interviews, filling out their reports. The girlfriend is giving her statement. Everything seems under control. Outside, in that parking lot, Devonte and his father are standing there. Maybe they're talking. Maybe they're just cooling off. But whatever peace existed in that moment, it was about to shatter. Because here's what nobody expected. The argument started back up. Right there in that parking lot. Right there with police still on the property. Just feet away. Whatever had been brewing between father and son, whatever tension had been building for years, it all came rushing back. And this time, there would be no calming down. Neighbors would later say they heard approximately 20 shots, thought it was fireworks. That's how much gunfire rang out in that Buckhead apartment complex. But it wasn't fireworks. It was Devonte Rao Tolliver, 54 years old, unloading on his own son. The officers inside heard it too. Gunshots. Multiple gunshots. They dropped what they were doing and rushed outside. And what they found was every officer's nightmare, a fresh crime scene. And they'd been right there when it happened. Devonte Scoffield was on the ground, 32 years old, father of two. The man his sister described as passionate and caring. He was lying in that parking lot with multiple gunshot wounds. The medical examiner would later confirm he'd been shot times at least 12 times, asterisk. 12. Let that sink in for a second. Not one reactive shot, not two shots in panic, asterisk 12 times deliberate pulls of a trigger. And standing there, gun still in hand, was his father. Tolliver's story was simple, almost rehearsed. He thought Devonte was reaching for his waistband, thought his son was about to pull a gun on him, felt threatened, felt like his life was in danger. So he fired, and kept firing, and kept firing. But here's the problem with that story. When police searched Devonte's body, they found no gun, no weapon, nothing in his waistband, nothing in his pockets, nothing nearby that could have been mistaken for a firearm, just a dead man and a father's claim that he'd felt threatened. Make it make sense. The scene was secured immediately. Crime scene tape went up. Witnesses were separated and interviewed.
It is disheartening, it's very sad, it's very traumatizing, it is very triggering.
A father is in jail. His 32-year-old son shot to death, and police say the father pulled the trigger, a neighbor of the son.
So to find out that he met that end, that's like, wow, that's like, he didn't deserve that. He didn't deserve that. He did not deserve that at all.
Early Thursday morning, Atlanta police responded to a woman and a man arguing at a complex on 55 Far Road in Buckhead. Police say while interviewing the woman inside, the man's father showed up. The two men went outside, where police say the father shot and killed his son. The neighbor says he has heard the woman and son arguing weeks before, but overnight Thursday awoken to more arguing.
So when I went back to bed and then I heard, pop, 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 I'm like, at first, I'm like, are those gunshots or is that fireworks? But then, I did not want to go see. I did not get up out of bed. I did not go outside. I did not come out. I did not go anywhere.
Residents say safety is a lesser priority for management. Their main gate, residents say, has been open, unmonitored for weeks. A former condo owner, now proxy to a current owner, didn't want to show his face, says,
we need to create a real solution so that HOA can be trusted again, that homeowners can trust HOA again, and more importantly, residents can be in a safe environment. But as long as you have things like this, you're going to turn Buckhead into Buckhood.
So far this year, Atlanta police crime data shows that there's been at least 17 calls to the address 55 Far Road for various activities, such as assault and theft.
As a matter of fact, I'm surprised it's not more, honestly. You can see cops around in this area all the time.
Residents say voicing concerns have fallen on deaf management ears.
I don't know what's happening. I haven't even seen the manager in over a month, so who knows what they're going to do.
The girlfriend, still inside, had to process what had just happened. She'd called for help, called for someone to de-escalate the situation, and now her boyfriend was dead, killed by the very person she'd called. She was placed on paid administrative leave from her position as a Fulton County Marshal, pending the outcome of the investigation. Standard procedure when an officer, even one off duty, is connected to a violent incident, but the questions lingered. What exactly did she tell Tolliver when she called? Did she know about the gun her boyfriend's father was carrying? Did she have any idea it would end like this? The forensics team got to work. 12 shell casings scattered across that parking lot. Blood evidence, trajectory, analysis. Every piece of evidence painted the same picture. A man shot multiple times at close range. No signs of a struggle beyond the initial fight that had happened inside the apartment, the one the police had already responded to. Detectives interviewed neighbors. One woman said she'd been sitting on her couch, watching the news, when she heard the shots. 20 rounds, she estimated. She'd thought they were fireworks, maybe some late-night celebration. She never imagined it was a father killing his son just outside her window. The investigators pulled records on the address. Asterisk 12 times domestic disturbance calls in the past year. Once a month, something had been going on at that apartment. Arguments, fights, tension that kept bubbling to the surface. Police had been managing the situation, responding to calls, separating parties, taking statements, but they'd never been able to stop what was building. And now, it had reached its inevitable, tragic conclusion. Devonte Rao Tolliver was arrested at the scene. He didn't run, didn't try to flee. He stayed right there, weapon nearby, waiting for officers to take him into custody. The charges came quickly: murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. He was taken to Fulton County Jail, booked, photographed. By the next day, his mugshot was circulating on the news. A 54-year-old man staring into the camera, the weight of what he'd done written all over his face. Or maybe that's just what we want to see. Maybe he felt justified. Maybe he still believed his son had been reaching for something. We don't know what was going through his mind. What we do know is this: when he appeared before a judge, bond was denied. The judge looked at the evidence: 12 shots fired, no weapon found on the victim, police officers present on the scene, and decided Tolliver was staying behind bars. No amount of money was going to get him out while he awaited trial. Clyburn didn't want to do the interview, didn't want to be on camera, talking to reporters, reliving the worst moment of her life. But she agreed to speak because, in her words, she didn't want this tragedy to define her brother's life. She wanted people to know who Devonte really was, not just the headlines, not just the victim in a parking lot, but the brother she'd never get to call again. When the news reached her, she couldn't process it. "I wouldn't have ever imagined," she said, fighting back tears. "Not in 100 years would I have thought that this was the phone call I was getting." Think about that for a second. Not 100 years. Because when you grow up with someone, when you share a family, a father, a history, you never imagine it ending like this. You imagine growing old together. You imagine your kids growing up with their kids. You imagine holiday dinners and inside jokes and all the normal things families do. You don't imagine your father standing over your brother's body with a smoking gun. "That's my big brother, D," said her voice breaking, "and I will never be able to call him again. Never." That's the finality of it. No more phone calls. No more advice. No more checking in. No more watching him be a father to his 2 kids. No more seeing him build his business, chase his dreams, prove to everyone that he was more than his past. All of that gone in 12 shots. D talked about who Devonte had become. Yes, he was a convicted felon. She didn't hide from that. But he'd done the work. He'd served his time, paid his debt, and come out the other side, determined to be better. He was working as an independent contractor in Metro Atlanta. He was providing for his children. He was present in their lives in ways a lot of fathers aren't. He loved being a dad, loved being a brother, loved creating, building, growing. He cared genuinely and deeply about people, Dee said. He was a passionate person. And then she said something that stuck with everyone who heard it. Just remember him as being a lover and a giver, a helper, a helper. The irony cuts deep, doesn't it? Because on the night he died, he was the one who needed help. And the person who showed up to help became the person who killed him.
I wouldn't have ever imagined, not in 100 years, would I have thought that this was the phone call I was getting.
Dee Clyburn says she still can't process what she's been told, that her older brother, 32-year-old Devonte Scoffield, was shot and killed by their own father. On Friday, Clyburn spoke with us by phone, fighting back tears as she described the shock and heartbreak.
That's my big brother, and I will never be able to call him again.
Clyburn says Scoffield was the proud father of 2 young children, an entrepreneur who worked as an independent contractor in Metro Atlanta, and a family man who loved being a dad, a brother, and a creative spirit.
He cared genuinely and deeply about people. He was a passionate person.
Earlier in the day, a judge denied bond for their father, 54-year-old Devonte Rao Tolliver. Investigators say he drove to the 55 Farr Apartments in Buckhead after learning his son had been involved in a car crash. According to an affidavit, he and his son began fighting inside the apartment, but when officers arrived, they say both men appeared calm and walked out together. Once they got to the parking lot, the argument started again. Investigators say the father told police he believed his son reached towards his waistband as if he had a gun, so he fired at least 12 shots. Police say they searched Schofield's body, but he did not have a gun.
Just remember him as being a lover and a giver, a helper.
Here's the thing about Devonte Rao Tolliver. He's going to live with what he did for the rest of his life. Whether he's convicted, whether he serves time, whether he ever walks free again, he's going to carry the weight of killing his own son. That's a burden that doesn't go away. That's a sentence that starts the moment you pull that trigger and doesn't end until you take your last breath. There's an old story that circulates in some communities about a father who killed his son decades ago. When he went before the judge didn't send him to prison. Instead, the judge said, "Your sentence is to live with the fact that you murdered your son." That was it. No jail time, just the knowledge of what he'd done. And that, the judge believed, was punishment enough. They don't do that anymore. The legal system doesn't work like that. If you kill your child, you're going to face charges, you're going to face trial, and if convicted, you're going to face serious time. But the principle remains true. Living with that kind of guilt, that kind of knowledge, is its own form of prison. Tolliver claimed self-defense, said he thought Devonte was reaching for a gun, said he feared for his life. But 12 shots? 12? That's not fear. That's not panic. That's rage. That's something deeper, something darker, something that had been building between them for years. Both men had criminal pasts. Both men had been through the system. Both men knew what violence looked like, knew what it cost, and yet they couldn't find a way to break the cycle. Couldn't find a way to communicate without fists. Couldn't find a way to resolve conflict without it escalating to the point of no return. And now, one of them is dead, and the other is facing the rest of his life behind bars. When Tolliver appeared in court, the evidence was damning. Prosecutors laid it out piece by piece. The initial fight inside the apartment witnessed. The calm demeanor when police arrived documented. The walk to the parking lot observed by officers. The gunshots heard by those same officers. The body searched thoroughly. The lack of a weapon confirmed. The defense tried to argue self-defense, tried to paint a picture of a father who feared his son, who had reason to believe his life was in danger. But the prosecution kept coming back to the same questions. If you were so afraid, why did you walk outside with him calmly? If you were so afraid, why didn't you stay inside where the police were? If you were so afraid, why did you fire 12 times? One shot might be fear, 2 shots might be panic, but 12? That's intent. That's a decision made over and over again with each pull of the trigger. The girlfriend's testimony was crucial. She explained the context of the night, the argument, the decision to call Tolliver, the hope that he could calm things down. She talked about the toxic patterns in their relationship, the history of police calls, the cycle they couldn't seem to break. And she had to live with the knowledge that her phone call had set the night's events in motion. Not her fault she didn't pull the trigger, but still, that guilt would follow her. Witnesses testified about what they heard. Neighbors described the sound of gunfire echoing through the complex. Officers described the scene they found when they rushed outside. Forensic experts explained the evidence, the shell casings, the trajectory of the bullets, the wounds on Devonte's body, and through it all, Tolliver maintained his story. He thought his son was armed. He thought his life was in danger. He did what he felt he had to do. But the jury would have to decide, was it self-defense or was it murder? Let's talk about what led to this moment. Because it wasn't just one night. It wasn't just one argument. This was years in the making. 12 domestic disturbance calls in 1 year. That's not normal. That's a pattern. That's a relationship, or in this case, a family dynamic that's completely broken. And yet, nobody could stop it. Police would show up, separate everyone, take statements, maybe make an arrest, and then everyone would go back to their corners until the next time. The system tries. Officers respond. Reports get filed. Sometimes people get locked up for the night. But unless someone presses charges, unless someone decides to break the cycle, it just keeps going. Round and round. Fight after fight. Call after call. And the people trapped in it, they often don't see a way out. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's loyalty. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's all three. But they stay. They keep trying. They keep hoping things will get better, that this time will be different, that somehow, some way, they'll figure it out. Devonte and his girlfriend had that kind of relationship. Passionate? Yes, but also volatile. And when his father got involved, it added another layer of complexity. Because now, it wasn't just a couple trying to work things out, it was a father trying to parent a grown man, trying to control a situation he had no business being in the middle of. Tolliver should have stayed home, should have told his son's girlfriend to call the police if she felt unsafe, should have recognized that at 54 years old, he had no business getting into a physical fight with his 32-year-old son over a relationship dispute or a car accident or whatever the real issue was. But he didn't. He showed up, he engaged, and he brought a gun. 2 kids lost their father that night. 2 young children who will grow up with a hole in their lives that can never be filled. They'll have questions. They'll want to know what happened, why it happened, who their father was, what kind of man he was becoming before his life was cut short. And what do you tell them? How do you explain that their grandfather killed their father? How do you make sense of that kind of family tragedy? How do you help them understand that violence doesn't solve anything? That anger destroys everything it touches? That the people who are supposed to love and protect you can sometimes be the ones who hurt you the most? Those kids will carry this for the rest of their lives. It'll shape how they see family, how they handle conflict, how they process anger and fear and loss. And hopefully, someone in their lives will help them break the cycle. Will teach them that there's another way, that you don't have to repeat the patterns of the generation before you. Devonte's sister, Dee, talked about how he was turning his life around, how he'd made mistakes, but was actively working to be better, how he was present for his kids, involved, loving. He was trying to give them something different, something better than what he'd had. And now, they'll never get to see the full version of who he was becoming. The family set up a GoFundMe to help with funeral expenses. Because on top of the grief, on top of the trauma, on top of the impossible task of explaining to two children why their father isn't coming home, there's also the financial burden of laying someone to rest. The system doesn't help with that. The headlines move on to the next story. But the family, they're left picking up the pieces. This case forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about family, about fatherhood, about the point where discipline becomes control, where concern becomes violence, where love becomes something unrecognizable. At what age does a parent stop having the right to physically intervene in their child's life? Devonte was 32, a grown man, a father himself, and yet his father still felt entitled to show up, get physical, assert dominance. That's not parenting. That's not protection. That's something else entirely. And when you add a gun to that equation, when you add years of unresolved tension, criminal histories, toxic relationship patterns, and a moment of rage in a parking lot, you get this. You get a father standing over his son's body. You get 12 shots fired. You get a family destroyed. The girlfriend thought she was calling for help. She thought a father could calm his son down, could talk sense into him, could de-escalate. Instead, she got the opposite. She got escalation. She got violence. She got death. And now she has to live with that. Has to wonder if things would have been different if she'd called 911 instead. Has to wonder if there was something else she could have done, some other choice she could have made. That's survivor's guilt. That's trauma. That's the ripple effect of one night's violence. Tolliver will likely spend the rest of his life in prison. The charges are serious. The evidence is clear. Self-defense is a tough sell when you fire 12 shots at an unarmed man while police are on the scene. And even if, by some miracle, he beats the charges or gets a reduced sentence, he'll never escape what he did. He'll never get his son back. He'll never undo those 12 shots. The holidays were mentioned in one of the sources, Thanksgiving approaching, Christmas a couple months away, times when families come together, when you're supposed to be grateful, when you're supposed to celebrate. But for this family, those holidays will forever be marked by absence, by the empty chair at the table, by the knowledge that their family was torn apart, not by some outside force, but by their own. Devonte Scoffield was a lover, a giver, a helper. That's how his sister wanted him to be remembered. Not as a statistic, not as a headline, not as a victim in a parking lot, but as a person, a brother, a father, a man who was actively working to be better, to do better, to give his children and his family something to be proud of. His life mattered, his death matters, and the circumstances that led to it, the toxic patterns, the unresolved trauma, the cycle of violence that nobody could break, those matter too. Because this story isn't unique. It's happening in families across the country. Different names, different cities, same pattern. Arguments that escalate, pride that won't bend, anger that won't cool, violence that becomes the language when words fail. And then, one day, someone doesn't get back up. Someone's brother, someone's son, someone's father, gone. And everyone left behind has to figure out how to keep living in a world that no longer make sense. D. Clyburn said she'll never be able to call her brother again. That's the reality of this. That's the permanence of violence. You don't get a do-over. You don't get to apologize and make it right. You don't get to say, I didn't mean it, or let's start over. You get a funeral. You get a GoFundMe. You get news coverage that fades after a few days. And you get a lifetime of wondering what could have been different. Devonte was 32. His kids will grow up without him. His sister will live with the absence. His father will live with the guilt. And the rest of us? We watch the story unfold, shake our heads, and hope, desperately hope, that somehow we can learn from it, that we can recognize the warning signs in our own families, our own relationships, our own patterns, that we can choose differently before it's too late. Because once those shots are fired, there's no taking them back. That's the story. A father, a son, 12 shots, and a family that'll never be the same. If this one hits you, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. We cover cases like this every day. Real stories about real people caught up in domestic violence and relationship crimes that turn deadly. Drop a comment and let me know what you think. And if you know someone who needs to hear these stories, share it with them. Sometimes these cases remind us to recognize the warning signs before it's too late. I'm out. Stay safe out there. And remember, violence is never the answer. This is Behind Dark Crime.